What's up guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. Today I'm pumped to bring you one of our weirdest and most unique builds, fully remastered and massively improved. We've got a brand new, fully fleshed out backstory and roleplaying, as well as totally reworked skills and perks to make the build so much more effective. This is the Sand Demon. The Sand Demon is nothing like your average mortal. He was created as a result of unspeakable atrocities carried out in a hidden laboratory deep in the Alakir Desert. Before he had a conscience and an understanding of empathy, the Sand Demon craved the taste of mortal flesh and got his way by channeling his immense innate strength and viciousness. He is a living, breathing plague to the masses, engraving his name in Redguard folklore as a result of endless devastating attacks on remote villages. In his wake, he leaves a trail of guts and gore, seeping into the sand after he's finished his feast. And it's not just his backstory that's steeped in badassery, it's also his playstyle. Using a combination of whirlwind cloak and invisibility, the Sand Demon approaches his prey hastily and stealthily, appearing at first to his victims as a mere dusty gust of wind. But when this wind draws close, the Sand Demon erupts from the ochre haze to slice the unsuspecting foes with his dual scimitars. Before we get into the build, be sure to check out the timestamps we put in the description. There you can navigate the video at your leisure. But with that out of the way, let's get right into the Sand Demon's race, standing stone, and stats. The Sand Demon is technically an orc. You'll know what I mean when I say technically once you hear the backstory. But as an orc, he has the Berserker Rage ability, granting him the chance to take half damage and do double damage for 60 seconds. This ability turns the screen red, blurring it and dulling the sound ever so slightly. I'd recommend using this as often as possible, as it looks awesome and sums up the fury of the Sand Demon's persona. Also, as an orc, he has an ingrained +10 to heavy armor, +5 to enchanting, +5 to one-handed, and +5 to smithing. All of these will be helpful for the final build. As for standing stones, use the Lover Stone early on, as he has some skills spread out across mage and warrior categories. After that, the only viable stone with any real benefit to the Sand Demon is the Atronach Stone. But early on, the Shadow Stone is also passable if you want to turn invisible but don't have a proficiency in illusion yet. As for stat spread, the Sand Demon will have 60% health to be extra tanky, and then 40% stamina for all that sprinting, power attacking, and dual-wield attacking. This build is a cyclone of blades, blood, and rage, so we can't skimp on stamina. If you're wondering why there's no magicka investment, that'll make a lot more sense when we mention skills, spells, perks, and playstyle. But rest assured, the Sand Demon will have no trouble casting his crucial spells. The Sand Demon wasn't exactly born. He didn't have the luxury of an upbringing. His mother was a methodical and meticulous mage. This Redguard sorceress shut herself off from the world, locking herself deep in a hidden laboratory beneath the ochre dust storms of the Alakir Desert to work on her greatest creation, the Sand Demon. During her travels, she stumbled across the corpse of a heavily muscled orc who must have been a warrior before he died, and decided he would make the perfect bodyguard. She reanimated his corpse and took him back to the lab, where she would salvage his limbs and blood to create something new. Her goal was to create a life form which would serve her loyally. After many cruel and inhumane experiments, the likes of which the darkest Daedra would be nauseated by, she created life. But despite this miracle, it was barely sapient. The monstrosity had no conscience, only a ravenous hunger for flesh and a desire to kill. He wasn't ready to be trusted with autonomy, so she locked him in a cell for further experimentation. And that was all the Sand Demon knew for the first few years of his life. Living in the shell of a long-dead orc with some unusual muscle memory, the Sand Demon stared at stone walls in darkness, listening to the muffled howl of the desert winds above, and waiting anxiously for his master to return for the next gruesome experiment. Over the coming days, the Redguard sorceress would sedate him, making neurological adjustments to his foul temperament and volatile personality. In an attempt to give him some semblance of humanity, she stripped him of his autonomy, and deep in his unconscious state, the Sand Demon's hatred grew. When she left him one night after 10 consecutive days of mental torture, the Sand Demon found himself understanding his existence. He had been given the gift of basic intelligence and communication, despite never having learned through experience, and the Sand Demon became self-aware, no longer willing to tolerate captivity. It was now that escape was the only option. He gripped the bars holding him in isolation with fists fueled by unnatural strength, and he noticed that the bars were worn by age. He gritted his teeth, pulling the bars until they buckled under his power, bending wide and opening a gap just wide enough for the Sand Demon to squeeze through. Resolute and full of a burning ire, the Sand Demon made his way through the laboratory, listening intently for the steady breathing of the sleeping sorceress. When he found her, she was resting peacefully. The Sand Demon felt an insatiable hunger then, again, his mouth salivating as he yearned for sustenance he hadn't had since his previous life. Without hesitation, he pounced on his master, clawing his unkempt nails at her throat to kill her, before tearing her open and feasting on her flesh. As his stomach relished in the warm, freshly consumed entrails, the sand demon made his way to the surface. He wrenched free the door to the laboratory and was met by the calm, cold embrace of the Alakir Desert in twilight. With his mouth still smeared with blood, the sand demon laughed. He was free from his cage now and would not be answering to anyone ever again. From here, the sand demon ventured out into the endless expanses of the desert. His journey was dotted with small villages and settlements, and whenever he found them, he would nourish his stomach by devouring the flesh of the inhabitants. These small settlements couldn't defend against his onslaught, and he felt no remorse when he killed. These free folks knew nothing of suffering. He had been born a slave, a necromancer's plaything. Quick death at his hand was nothing in comparison. After making his way gradually across the mainland of Hammerfell, he began to make a name for himself. Redguard communities across the province began to tell horror stories of the nefarious sand demon, who consumed any men, women, or children foolish enough to venture out into the desert alone. But unlike most folklore, this nightmare was real. When larger cities began to understand the reality of this tale, they began to take things a bit more seriously. Word had reached Elenir, on the east side of Hammerfell, about the sand demon's path of destruction. The sand demon had supposedly been heading east and was closing in on the Craglorn region, dangerously close to the home for these Redguards. In the city of Elenir, known as the City of Mages, the greatest warriors and battle mages from the region gathered to take down this beast of legend. When the sand demon approached, he was halted by caution, noticing the size of the city. His stomach growled at him furiously, beckoning him to proceed. Think of the feast, it seemed to call to him. It would be a banquet. The sand demon tuned the voice resonating from the pit of his stomach out, and instead opted to skirt around the outside of the city. But as he put the city of Elenir behind him, his attention was caught by the sight of hundreds of men leaving the city, coming directly at him. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one, and they were coming to meet him out in the dry wastes like fools. The sand demon grinned, drawing the dual scimitars he'd pillaged from a village weeks prior. As the attackers approached, the sand demon called upon a gust of wind, raising the sand from the ground and sending it spiraling around his form like a million shards of rock orbiting a planet. Whether the sorceress had taught him the skill subconsciously, or if it was another shadowed memory from his past life, the sand demon didn't care. The first warriors to reach him were sent flying in every direction, and then the others took more caution. The sand demon was unfazed by them. Their lack of belief would kill them all. At that moment, he seemed to blend into the haze of sand as he charged at the petrified men one by one. He killed tens of warriors, but their numbers kept replenishing, and he knew he would have to draw back. His hunger screamed at him to feast, but he wasn't going to rush thoughtlessly into his death, so he retreated east and kept going until he found himself in the mountains. At this point, he was weak from hunger, and when a patrol of Imperials ambushed him, he saw the wisdom in coming quietly, at least until he could isolate one of them and feast on him in private. The Imperials carted him off to Helgen to await judgment. After escaping Helgen, the first thing you'll need to do is become a vampire. Whether you do this for an alternate start or by rushing off to contract the virus as soon as possible, you'll have to suspend your disbelief until you've contracted the disease. The most important thing to remember when role-playing is that the sand demon is far from your average mortal. Morality and empathy are lost on him, and his primary motivations are power, killing, and feeding. But at the same time, his creator actively attempted to give the sand demon some form of good judgment, so you won't be needlessly killing everything. If some people are going to help him further his goals, he can tame his hunger well enough. Also, as consuming mortal flesh is so important to the character, getting your hands on the Ring of Nimira is definitely a priority. As for factions, he will follow the main storyline as he sees the value in powers he can acquire in the process. This reasoning leads directly into the Dragonborn DLC too. Not only will he need some spells and aesthetic items from the DLC, he'll obviously get a serious sense of satisfaction from murdering the arrogant dragon priest Marak. He will in fact pursue the Civil War questline, choosing to side with the Stormcloaks. While he has zero interest in the politics of mortals and couldn't care less about the Nord's nationalist values, the Civil War offers lots of killing potential, including bloody battles like the Siege of Whiterun. He doesn't see the need to work with the Dark Brotherhood, as he doesn't want to be told who he can and can't kill. Anyone who dares threaten him like the Dark Brotherhood do will instead be wiped from the history books and struck down into obscurity. He'll kill all of the cult members and he'll wear Nazir's hood. Lastly, he will follow the Dawnguard DLC, of course choosing to side with the vampires. Alright, so now that we have the Sand Demon's backstory, role-playing and factions, let's have a gander at how that'll affect his skills, spells, perks, and his overall playstyle. The main skills for this build will be one-handed, heavy armor, smithing, enchanting, and restoration. If you're familiar with the original build, you may notice that some skills have been removed. We've decided to streamline the Sand Demon's skills as the previous system was far from efficient. As mentioned earlier, under stats, the focus has been taken out of some of the Magicka schools as the Sand Demon only needs free spells to operate. Rather than wasting tons of perks, stat and skill investments, we're making the build more viable through casting cost reduction enchantments. The dual casting perks in Illusion and Destruction were the only ones we really pondered adding, but you'll notice in the playstyle that you'll be breaking invisibility really quickly, so they're really not necessary. But anyway, before we look at the specific perks and how to enchant effectively, the spells you'll want to acquire are basic healing spells. The main one should already be learned, Invisibility, and then Whirlwind Cloak. Pretty easy stuff. You can also use the Cyclone Shout to match the Whirlwind aesthetic. But with that said, let's now get into the specific essential perks for the Sand Demon. The Sand Demon went on a killing rampage across potentially the most daunting, desolate landmass on the continent of Tamriel, using no more than a pair of looted scimitars. Need I say anything more about his skill with one-handed weapons? From this skill tree, take the middle branch up to Savage Strike and Critical Charge, taking both, and then take the entire far right branch. As a beast known for relentlessly slaughtering masses of people, you've got to look the part, so Savage Strike is a must. The 25% bonus to standing power attacks is great, but you'll also have the ability to decapitate foes. And then, the Dual Flurry and Dual Savagery perks deserve a mention simply for how much they improve dual-wielding fighting styles. With the former, dual-wielding attacks will be 35% faster, and with the latter, they'll be 50% more powerful. Up next, we have Heavy Armor. When you have gale force winds pummeling grains of sand at your skin with enough velocity to flay your skin from the bone, wearing formidable clothing is a no-brainer. Also, it does help considerably for a heavily built warrior fighting hordes of angry adversaries. From this skill tree, we suggest taking the left branch up to conditioning. The right branch applies to full sets of heavy armor, which the Sand Demon won't be wearing, so forget about those. But conditioning is massively important as it stops you from being slowed by weighty armor pieces, allowing the Sand Demon to ambush his prey swiftly. While it's clear that we've optimized perk point allocation away from the Magicka schools, Restoration is one we can't pass up. Taking Novice Restoration and Regeneration are handy, but the reason we absolutely need this tree is the Necromage perk. For vampire characters, you'll be classed as undead, and all of your spells, shouts, and enchantments will be considerably stronger after getting this perk. In order to keep your scimitars sharp and your heavy armor tempered, smithing is the next main skill to focus on. From this skill tree, head up the right branch until you hit Daedric Smithing, and then grab Arcane Blacksmith. Daedric Smithing will cover your unique scimitars, and Arcane Blacksmith will let you smith up all of your enchanted gear. Lastly, we have Enchanting. Enchanting is always a great pick, but considering the lack of perk points dropped into the mage skills, it is definitely more important to the Sand Demon build. But we'll get into exactly which enchantments to take very soon. For now, take the entire middle branch up to and including extra effect. So, with all the skills, spells, and perks sussed out, this is how the Sand Demon will play. The goal is to enter battle like a concentrated sandstorm. Hard to see, hard to hit, and hard to keep your footing against. Cast Whirlwind Cloak and Invisibility to give yourself a Cyclone aesthetic, and then sprint full force into your enemies. Once the distance is closed, all who aren't swept off their feet will be right there for the chopping. Now whip out your scimitars and get to work, slashing and gashing. Once the fighting is through, you can feast to replenish any lost health. As for gear, you'll want to get your hands on a full set of Bone Mold armor, with the chest piece being the Bone Mold Guard armor. In place of the helmet, wear Nazir's Red Guard hood. The armor should all be smithed up and enchanted. Make sure you also wear a necklace for the extra enchanting slots, and then put on Namira's ring, or an enchanted ring if you feel you need the added enchantments more. The goal is to eventually get Fortify Illusion and Fortify Destruction on as much as possible to make up for the lack of perk points in those skills. After these, Fortify One-Handed is the next best choice for this sweet damage. Until you can get this armor set, be sure to enchant whatever early game apparel you use with Fortify Restoration. This will help you train up the skill early on. Don't worry about reducing an Illusion and Destruction cost yet, as those spells won't be available until a little later on. Eventually though, you'll be able to ditch Fortify Restoration altogether to focus on the other schools. In terms of swords, you have the choice to use either 2 enchanted scimitars or the unique scimitars Blood Scythe and Soul Render. Which effects work best for you is your call. If you choose to use standard scimitars with enchantments, use Absorb Stamina or Fiery Soul Trap. One final alternative for the best of both worlds is to use 1 enchanted standard scimitar along with Wind Shear, as unlike Blood Scythe and Soul Render, Wind Shear's unique enchantment will work without another unique scimitar. Well, there you have it guys. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet for more Skyrim builds and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us all on Twitter by following the links just below in the description. Also down in the description are timestamps to help you navigate throughout the video. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. I've been Drew, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.